What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And once again, free agency is right around the corner, and we all know that the New York Giants need to bolster their pass rush. This past season, not a whole lot of sacks, not a whole lot of quarterback pressures. Of course, Kayvon Thibodeau finishing the season with double-digit sacks, the first edge rusher to ever do that in a Wink Martindale system. But no longer are we running the Wink Martindale system. Wink Martindale had a fit, cursed out Brian Daboll, and quit on the team. So now we have Shane Bowen stepping in as the new defensive coordinator of the New York Giants, and his defensive scheme is going to look a whole lot different than the one that Wink Martindale deployed over the past two seasons. So going into this offseason, adding pass rushing talent is going to be a major point of emphasis for the New York Giants. There's a few draft prospects that we really like. Alex and I were just talking about Missouri kid Robinson in the second round could be a target for the Giants, but today we want to focus on free agency and look at some of the guys that the Giants could potentially sign at some different price points for the upcoming season. But before we dive into all that, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And who is the first free agent that comes to mind for the New York Giants in the pass rushing department?
I'm doing pretty good, and the latest kind of pass rusher that people are discussing is Jets specialist Bryce Huff. Now, Bryce Huff, former undrafted free agent, really good player. There are concerns with him. We'll talk about kind of what his price tag looks like, where he excels, where he struggles. As a pure pass rusher, in my opinion, Anthony, Bryce Huff is what we desperately wanted Azeez Ojulari to be. A guy that could step in and be an instant impact, like pure raw pass rush talent that would end up becoming a really good player for the Giants long term. Unfortunately, injury and inconsistencies have derailed Ojulari's career up to this point. At this point, I more so see him as a rotational guy, someone that is not starting, someone that kind of comes in on third downs, someone that can stay healthy in a more of a relaxed role. And Bryce Huff has the capacity to start. He's been more of that rotational guy for the Jets. They have, Carl Lawson, Jermaine Johnson. Bryce Huff really comes in there, and when they need the pass rush to spark, he's the guy that leads the charge. And that they have Will McDonald, who they drafted last year, 11th overall. So the expectation right now is that they're going to move on from Bryce Huff, which is unfortunate because he's a great player for them. But he does struggle in run defense, and that's where you ask yourself, can the Giants afford to have a defensive lineman or edge rusher, outside linebacker, who struggles in run defense but is a pure pass rusher? You play him every single down. They're gonna attack him in the run game, but as a pass rusher, third downs, early downs, he's gonna be an asset for you. So, you ask yourself, can he develop as a run stopper? I mean, he's been in the league for what, 3-4 years now? So 4 years, I guess. So you're kind of running the risk there. You're gambling with the fact that he could improve. The Giants have some good coaches. Andre Patterson would be a really good person to help him develop his run defense. So there is upside there. He's 25 years old, still super young. For example, the guy you just mentioned, Darius Robinson, will be entering the league at 24 years old. So his first season will be 24. I'm not really concerned about that, mainly because look at Jermaine Johnson with the Jets, entered at 24. He's one of the best pass rushers on that team, and they have really good pass rush talent. So, you ask yourself, Bryce Huff, 25, has years of experience. He could still improve. I'm happy to take a gamble on someone like that because we need the support, and he's not going to be like $20+ million per season, but it does not come without risk. So, what are your thoughts about Bryce Huff? Paying him a big contract, could you wrap your head around it? And what kind of red flags do you see with that type of move?
Yeah, I mean, you said it right there, paying him a big contract. That's what I'm going to dive into before I give my take on the player Bryce Huff. The contract could be interesting here because he is one of those players who hasn't proven a whole lot. However, what he's shown in flashes has been elite, and he's still very young, as you mentioned. So a contract for this guy is probably going to get pretty close to $20 million per season. You're talking probably $15 to $18 million on average annual salary. And then again, because he's not super proven, it's not something that you're expecting to be a locked-in long-term piece here in Bryce Huff. You're expecting him to be probably on a 2 or maybe a 3-year deal with an out after 2 years. So reasonably something like 2 years, $32 million is what you're going to see in a contract. But that means you're going to have a cap hit of at least $16 million per season, or at least on one of those 2 seasons on that contract. And if you push it to 3 years, again, that cap number will only rise if you backload the deal. It's not going to be a cheap signing for the New York Giants. However, one of the things we've been mentioning in great detail, Alex, Giants have plenty of cap space. They got more yesterday because the salary cap went up $30 million for all NFL teams, gave the Giants about an extra $10 million from what they were projected to have earlier in this offseason. So the Giants do have money to spend, plus they have money in the future. However, the Daniel Jones contract does still stand in the way, so they're going to need to backload these contracts into 2025, 26, and 27. That's going to be the case if they sign a player like Bryce Huff. Those big cap hits, they're going to happen in 25 and 26. So the Giants, if they want to spend, they got to spend now. And spending on a player like Bryce Huff, not a bad idea. I mean, if you look at his stats, he just now had his breakout. He had 10 sacks this past season. But here's the thing that kind of gives me some hesitancy about Bryce Huff, Alex. We're talking about a player that's played a career-high snaps this past season at 481 snaps. Let's compare that to Kayvon Thibodeau, 981 snaps. 500 extra snaps played from Kayvon Thibodeau. That's a big difference. Can Bryce Huff play 981 snaps and still give you double-digit sack production? That's a question, because right now, the way that the Jets have been using him, first of all, they have a lot of pass rushing depth, which really helps Bryce Huff. And second of all, they're not deploying him against the run. So when he does go out on the field, he's fresh. He's not worn down. He wasn't getting digged out by a tackle and a tight end on a sweep, right? Like, he hasn't been facing that every down kind of taxation that players like Kayvon Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari have been facing. And Jahad Ward, all the Giants starting edge rushers, they play on the field for all three downs. They're out there against the run. They're out there against the pass. But Bryce Huff has not done that yet. He hasn't played against both facets of the game. Of course, he's been on the field against running plays, but primarily he's been deployed on known passing downs. So those extra 500 snaps, those are probably 500 rushing snaps. How does he fare in a 900 snap season where he's not only rushing the passer, but also required to stop the run? It's a massive question mark with Bryce Huff. So you see the elite upside, you see the elite traits, and I know that we've talked about that a lot, Alex. Elite traits, especially when going into the 2024 NFL draft. You like to bank on traits, and especially the traits that separate you from anyone else at your position. Bryce Huff has some of those. He's a great pass rusher. He's got a lot of speed around the edge. He's got some really good pass rushing moves, and he finishes plays. He had a ton of pressures, but he also had a lot of sacks. 67 total pressures in 2023 on only 334 pass rushing snaps. That's like an astronomical number. He is winning his pass rushing snaps at a rate higher than I think anybody else in the NFL because of the low sample size, but the really high number of total pressures. So Bryce Huff, one of the most efficient pass rushers in the NFL, but again, still growing, and major question marks about whether or not he can be an every down player for you. I don't know if I'm comfortable spending that much money on a player who can't play every down, but it is kind of one of those risks that you need to run if you're the New York Giants. You have to find a way to add some talent to this defense to bolster this pass rush. You're not going to get any better production from a rookie, most likely. So going into free agency, investing that big money in Bryce Huff, who again is still growing. So far, he hasn't been a great run defender, and he hasn't been asked to do much run defending. But that doesn't mean he can't do it, and that doesn't mean he can't develop those skills and get better at it, especially because he's so young. So with the New York Giants, if they were to sign him, he's probably going to play a whole lot more than he has with the Jets the past few seasons. He's going to be asked to do a whole lot more. There might be some growing pains, but I do think he's a good enough player where eventually he's going to figure those things out and become an every down player. So this is a guy that I would be willing to invest that type of salary cap space into. But again, there is some hesitancy and there are some red flags for fans to know. But moving on, Alex, who is the next player on your short list? I know that you've kind of been writing some articles and doing some research on these pass rushers. So who's the next guy you've identified?
So the next guy on my list is Jadeveon Clowney. I know this is more of a, not going to be a young guy. He's going to be more of a 1-2 year type of player. Would have made a lot of sense if we ended up with Denard Wilson as our DC. But Jadeveon Clowney, my friends, is kind of that player every year that goes under the radar. Nobody remembers about him. Everyone's looking at Brian Burns. Everyone's looking at Josh Allen. Everyone's looking at these big-time pass rushers. Daniel Hunter's another one. But Jadeveon Clowney's coming off a very good season with the Baltimore Ravens, right? Former first-round pick, 31 years old. He's not getting a big-time deal anymore. He's getting these 1-2 year deals. where, a team like the Giants could say, hey, let's bring him in as an impact player for a year or two and then move on. Because look, the truth is simple, guys. The Giants could invest in Corbin Burns, or not Corbin Burns. The Giants could invest in Brian Burns. They could invest in Josh Allen. They could go out and spend on a Daniel Hunter. But the Giants are not winning a Super Bowl anytime soon, right? They're going to be investing, $25 million a year on a pass rusher who really they're not that close. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's not the right time to take that jump. However, Jadeveon Clowney paired with Kayvon Thibodeau, that's a formidable edge presence, in my opinion. Then you draft the guy like a Darius Robinson, have him work in, take that step forward as a rookie, and then take over for Jadeveon Clowney in year 2. Like, I think that's a nice transition for the Giants where they can have a 1-year guy, 2-year guy with an option maybe, and, you have an out after the first season, and then kind of decide on the future here and have a young guy that you're developing. So I kind of like that transition method because you can keep the costs down long term and not commit $25 million to a pass rusher when your team is still very far from being a competitive one. So, I kind of feel as maybe some of you guys disagree with me. You think the Giants can be more competitive. I personally don't see them winning a Super Bowl anytime soon. So I think right now it's best to continue developing our young talent, building for the future. Jadeveon Clowney allows you to be, and for what it's worth, Clowney allows you to be competitive now and gear up for the future. It's not like you have to sacrifice one for the other. More so talking about the financial investment of like a $30 million pass rusher compared to a guy that's going to make 10 mil, 12 mil next year on a 1-year contract at 31 years old, coming off a season where he had 78 pressures and 11 sacks, right? Really solid all-around presence, was one of the highest graded pass rushers on that Baltimore team. So, what are your thoughts on that? More of a transition guy that can help you win and compete now, but also help you develop a guy like a Darius Robinson or a Chop Robinson for the future. That way you can keep the cost down, give that guy a year to work his way in, find his role within the team, and you still remain competitive with a good player like Clowney who has tons of experience, and not just experience, but he's coming from a very good winning football team.
Yeah, he's played on a lot of good winning football teams in recent years. Even that Cleveland team that he was on in 2022 was pretty good. In 2020, he just missed Shane Bowen. Shane Bowen took over as the Titans defensive coordinator in 2021. But in 2020, he was also with a very good Tennessee Titans team that went to the postseason. So Clowney, a lot of winning experience. And honestly, he's one of the most interesting players of the modern age in football to me because this is a guy that most people consider to be a draft bust. But if you look at his NFL career, he's had an excellent one. Like, he's been a very good player for a very long time. Entered the 2024 NFL draft, became the number 1 overall pick for the Houston Texans, but never reached the expectations that were set out for him. He had a few highlight reels during his time in college, and everybody thought that he was going to be this elite pass rusher who puts up double-digit sacks, and he never was. I mean, his first double-digit sack season came in 2021 when he was drafted in 2014. But if you really take a look deeper into the stats, his run stops, his ability to stop the run, I mean, he's just been one of the best run-defending edge rushers throughout the entirety of his career, dating back to 2014 when he was a rookie. And I think that's where people kind of get confused with Jadeveon Clowney and say, oh, well, he's not the best pass rusher. You're right, he's not, but he's a really good edge-setting run defender, which is another need for this New York Giants team. Yes, we're talking about they need pass rushers, they need guys who can get after the quarterback, and for what it's worth, Clowney's gotten a lot better at that in recent seasons. He did just put up a career-high 71 total pressures with the Baltimore Ravens in 2023, so he's actually technically in his prime. He's been getting better the past several seasons, and he's really peaked this past year with Baltimore. 10 sacks, 71 total pressures. He's become a better edge or a pass rusher than he was years ago, but he's still run defending at a very high level. So in terms of those veterans that you want to bring in with experience who can do multiple things for your defense, I think Jadeveon Clowney does make a whole lot of sense for the New York Giants, and you know that you can probably sign him on a cheap 1-year deal worth probably around $10 million or so in salary cap. So Clowney is one of those guys that I like for this team, and I think that he didn't play in Shane Bowen's defense. Again, he was in Tennessee in 2020, and Bowen took over as DC in 2021, but he played in a very similar defense, multiple front, playing that linebacker and defensive end role. The Tennessee Titans defense under Mike Vrabel has been very consistent. So 2020, it was still similar to what Shane Bowen's going to be deploying with the New York Giants. So I think that Jadeveon Clowney could pretty seamlessly fit in to this new defensive scheme, play that multiple front defense, line up on the edge, line up a little bit inside, that kind of stuff. And so what I really like though about Clowney, Alex, is when you're taking a look at our edge rushers, the New York Giants edge rushers, Kayvon Thibodeau's still developing as a run defender. I think he's pretty good in that regard, but still not great. And then Azeez Ojulari has just not been very good against the run throughout the majority of his career. Of course, he's been injured a lot. And then really our backup, Jihad Ward, was the run defender. He was our edge-setting pass rusher who can kind of contribute as a run defender. But the Giants don't really have a whole lot of other edge rushing run defenders. So Jadeveon Clowney fits that mold. He can be your run defender. He can be the guy that sets the edge and prevents those outside running games from taking over. And we've seen the Giants pretty much get completely decimated against the run under Wink Martindale. So now under Shane Bowen, you have to assume that stopping the run is going to be a point of emphasis. Bringing in a guy like Jadeveon Clowney is one of the best ways to fix up this run defense, in my opinion, while also adding some pretty solid pass rushing upside from an experienced veteran. So I do like Jadeveon Clowney. If the Giants can't get a guy like a Bryce Huff, they decide maybe they don't want to go after a guy like a Bryce Huff because the price point is too high. Going into that middle tier and signing someone more affordable like Jadeveon Clowney makes sense. And again, Clowney, because he can do all those things for your defense and really bolster your run defense, he does make a whole lot of sense for this New York Giants team.
Absolutely. I think he does too. And, the next guy on the list is someone that you have pointed to a couple times, and Danico Autry of the Tennessee Titans. And, this is a guy that comes with a ton of experience alongside Shane Bowen. So it makes perfect sense if the Giants want to go down this route. He is a little bit older at 33 years old, former undrafted free agent out of Mississippi State. Good size at 6'5" and 285 pounds. But look, this is a guy coming off a very good season. 53 total pressures, 12 sacks. In fact, over his last 4 seasons, he's cracked 11 sacks in 3 of those campaigns, with a minimum of 37 pressures. And that was this, back in 2020. Over those last 3 years, he's had a low of 53 pressures this past season. The problem is he's not a very good tackler. His run defense is okay. Not the best tackler, solid pass rusher. He's about I'd say a slightly above average player. And because he's 33 years old, you're not going to have to pay him a whole lot. So, tell me about why Danico Autry makes a lot of sense for this team. I know you think he's a really good scheme fit, older, cheap, knows Shane Bowen's defense. I think that does count for something. Probably a short-term contract type of guy. You're replacing a guy like Jihad Ward, or he's a starter most likely for the Giants. So I think that having a cheaper alternative there, a little bit older, experience, knows our scheme, good transition player. If you want to put a Darius Robinson behind him, split those reps up, you can definitely utilize that strategy and get a lot of maximum value out of it. So why does Danico Autry stand out to you as a guy that could fit the Giants' needs?
Well, one of the things that you mentioned as a reason why he would stand out is his familiarity with Shane Bowen. And another thing that you said to me that stood out was this could be a replacement for Jihad Ward. I actually see it a little bit differently. I think Danico Autry would be a replacement for Leonard Williams. Again, he's standing in at 6'5", 285 pounds. That gives him a similar size to Leonard Williams. And while he is an edge rusher, so is Leonard Williams. Over the past couple seasons under Wink Martindale, Leonard Williams has been playing on the interior for the New York Giants. Now, of course, he's with the Seattle Seahawks, and he's back to playing on the edge as a defensive end. So for the New York Giants in this new Shane Bowen defense, if Leonard Williams were still here, he'd probably be playing more on the edge than he were on the interior. But it's really good to have these guys who have a lot of size and versatility to kind of move inside and outside. So for a guy like Danico Autry, yes, he's going to be looked at as an edge rusher. He's going to be a starter who lines up over the offensive tackle and gets after the quarterback, but he's also a guy that moves inside with his 285-pound frame and his mass and ability to move offensive linemen in the running game. So again, kind of similar to Clowney being one of those guys that can provide for you in both facets of the game on all 3 downs. That's what I like about Danico Autry. And you mentioned it. He's got that familiarity with Shane Bowen. The best seasons of Danico Autry's career have come under Shane Bowen. These past 3 years with the Tennessee Titans, he's played 700 snaps in 2 of those seasons. He's been on the field for plenty of pass rushing snaps and run defending snaps. He's put up a lot of sacks. He's put up a lot of pressures. 53 or more pressures in each of his last 3 seasons. That would make him the best pass rusher on the New York Giants by far statistically from the last 2 seasons. So when you're looking at that and you're looking at his ability to defend the run, I know maybe his run defense grades haven't been that great, or his missed tackle rate is pretty high. You were right in pointing that out. He's got an alarmingly high amount of missed tackles. However, he is one of those big mass players, just a big bulky guy that's hard to move in the running game, which allows you to just plug gaps that's a way that the Giants haven't been able to ever since Leonard Williams was traded away. Leonard Williams was great because he was super versatile. He was a great pass rusher from the interior. But again, if you're thinking back to the James Betcher days, the Patrick Graham days, where that defense was a little bit more multiple in its front, and you had Leonard Williams moving across the formation. He wasn't just playing that 3-tech. He was playing a lot of 5-tech, 6-tech, getting on the outside shoulder of the offensive tackle. That's what you're going to see from Denico Autry. So it's not really one of those edge rushers in the sense that Kayvon Thibodeau is an edge rusher. You think about Kayvon Thibodeau, he stands up. He's in a 2-point stance, and he's playing outside linebacker and attacking an offensive tackle. You're still going to see Denico Autry attack an offensive tackle, but he's not going to be doing it while standing up in a 2-point stance. He's going to have his hand in the dirt, and he's going to be playing defensive end on the outside shoulder of the tackle, and he's going to be getting after the quarterback that way. So this is a much different style of edge rusher than what Giants fans are used to seeing from the past 2 seasons under Wink Martindale, but he really is a good player for this particular scheme. So to me, this isn't the Jihad Ward replacement, Jihad Ward being one of those outside linebackers that kind of gets after the quarterback rotationally and stops the run. Denico Autry being an every down starter that moves across your formation, fills a ton of gaps for you, competes in the running game, and also gets after the quarterback in an efficient manner while playing out of a 3-point stance. So I really like Denico Autry. When you're looking at what Shane Bowen wants to do on defense, when you're looking at how he deploys his different personnel packages, it's a lot of nickel. It's a lot of extra defensive backs on the field, which again is why the Giants need to re-sign a guy like Xavier McKinney, but also looking into that front 7, they have to be married to that defensive backfield. And one of the ways that they do that is by getting these pass rushers and moving them all across the formation, inside and outside. And that's what Denico Autry has done so well for the Tennessee Titans defense. He led the team in sacks last year, and they have Harold Landry. And Harold Landry is a pretty damn good pass rusher in his own right. But Denico Autry was still able to lead the team in sacks, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that he was moving across the formation, playing defensive end, playing on the edge, playing on the interior. That's what you get from Denico Autry. That versatility, very valuable in this defensive scheme, and that's why when you're looking at him and the potential contract that he might be able to be signed for, 1-year deal, probably like $7 million, very affordable. You don't have to guarantee the whole thing, so your cap hit is probably only around $5 million for a player like Denico Autry. Sign me up. He's familiar with the scheme. He's very efficient. He's a veteran leader. All those things. He checks every box for you, and he's affordable. So Denico Autry is going to be one of those players that I think that the Giants should make a priority signing in free agency.
Yeah, it definitely makes a lot of sense to me. Any of these 3 guys ultimately have the potential to make an impact for the Giants as primary starters. And look, as much as we all know this, guys, on paper, the Giants have very minimal depth at the pass rush position, and they could go after the draft, but I think they're going to spend a little bit of money here on a free agent, because ultimately if you want to compete, you need to pair someone like Kayvon Thibodeau. I think the most important kind of narrative right now is that I would like to take some pressure off of Thibodeau. I think there's too much on him. There's too much weight on his shoulders to be the primary producer here. They need someone that is going to come in and match his level of production, or at least take the pressure off. Last year, nobody stepped up. Jihad Ward, Azeez Ojulari, nobody stepped up to help Kayvon Thibodeau. Everyone was expecting him to be the impact player, to be the guy that made a difference. And at some points he did. But you can't always be that guy. Some players are capable, and like Aaron Donald, like if you're one of the best, you can be that guy every single game. Kayvon's not there yet. Hopefully this coaching change, they incorporate him as more of a pass rusher, and they really did some weird things with him last year in Wink Martindale's system. And for what it's worth, I think that we might see a better version of Kayvon Thibodeau this upcoming year. But with that being said, getting a good pass rusher to pair with him, take some pressure off, allow somebody else to step up. And I think Kayvon will benefit from that ultimately long term, because if they have someone that can match his production, that needs to be double teamed, needs to be chipped by tight ends, think about how many 1v1 battles Kayvon's going to have because of that. You're going to see him get better too. So I think that there is a point here where this isn't just about adding pass rush talent. This is about maximizing Kayvon Thibodeau's potential as an asset long term, and the Giants need to invest in that. If they're not, let alone investing in another guy that's going to produce, it's also to help Kayvon Thibodeau. So you're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone there, in my opinion. But obviously you guys know what I think. Offensive line, defensive line, both need free agency support, and I expect the Giants to be pretty active in that regard this offseason.
Yeah, me too. They definitely need to bolster their trenches. I think free agency is going to be one of the top ways that they do that. And I'm excited to see what they do. You make some good points there about how an extra pass rusher is definitely going to open things up for Kayvon Thibodeau, create more pass rushing opportunities for him. And just overall, it's going to benefit the front seven of this defense, which was definitely a weakness at times for this team last year. Great inside linebacker play. Bobby Okereke, Micah McFadden, they looked great. However, a lot of inconsistency on the edge, a lot of injuries on the edge. And then after the Leonard Williams trade, a lack of depth on the interior. That's a need that the Giants do need to address. So Denico Autry kills two birds with one stone in multiple ways. Moves on the interior, moves on the edge. And so do other guys that we mentioned in this episode. But it's going to be really interesting to see what the New York Giants do in free agency. And of course, we're going to continue to update you on any news and rumors and all that speculation right here on Fireside Giants. So make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topics down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review and go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Giants. Without further ado, we will catch you on the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.
TVSO.